Okay, hello and welcome to another episode of Charlie's Desk. Um, Today's another Brailler episode, um, but we're jumping into the future, um, relatively, from where we were, 1893, and then a Brailler from the 50s. So on the desk today, in the center, is the Braille Lite by Blazy Engineering, the BLT 2000. I'm thinking because they called it the 2000 that it's probably from the 90s, right? And then the tools that are on the desk, at the 3 o'clock position, there's a little tubular device that's a wire stripper. It has two little blades in it, and you kind of pull some wire through it to expose the metal part of the wire from the plastic insulation. That's at 3 o'clock. And then at 4 o'clock-ish, there's a little battery-powered soldering iron. If I were to want to solder something together, which I won't, because I don't know what it is. I don't know what that means. So, but I have it because it feels relevant tool-wise. And then at 6 o'clock, I have my shoulder ruler, just for providing some measurement context. And then over at 9 o'clock, I have these wire stripping pliers, and maybe you've heard about these or seen these, or maybe not. They're like pliers in form, but they're kind of different in function. They're very specific kind of pliers, and they're made out of flat metal, and there's actually a lot of writing on it. And it's they're wire stripping pliers, right? They're for electricians, and so they have different gaps for different width wires that allow you to strip the wire, so expose the metal part of the wire from whatever the insulation is, so you can make a connection, you can solder it or whatever. And then there's some crimping things too. Like, you don't cut things with these pliers, you crimp things. And they're also a little tubular device. I forget what they're called, but you put two exposed ends of a wire into this little tube with metal on the inside. Instead of like soldering together, you just like squeeze the tube, and you use these pliers for that purpose. So those are at 9 o'clock. And then in the center we have this cute little thing that is made out of gray and black plastic. It's like the size of, a reasonable book. It is like 8.5 inches long, and then so it's like 8 by 4.5, and then it is about 1.5 inches tall as it's lying on the ground. At the top portion of this little rectangle, you have your 6 Braille entry keys and a space bar, and then you have another plastic bar, and then you have a refreshable Braille display. And that's now I'm finally getting to the point. I want to talk a little bit about refreshable Braille displays. Not so much this specific Braille Lite. I wasn't able to find that much about it on the internet. I was able to talk to some friends who remember having it as kids. And these are young people, so it could be the early 2000s. I don't even know. So maybe this is from the 2000s, but anyways, I would just want to talk about refreshable Braille displays because it's very relevant. So how many cells does this one have? Not that many, but I'm going to count. 1, has 18 cells. And one thing that's different about these cells is instead of 2 by 3, they are 2 by 4 cells. And this allows you to interact with the computer in a sort of a different way. There's lots more stuff that my friends are going to be like, Charlie, there's all these reasons, but the simplest one I'll say is just you can display the cursor in that extra row of dots at the bottom. So you have your normal Braille cell above it, and then you can have this moving cursor underneath. But what is a Braille display? What is a refreshable Braille display? The metaphor I would use is each cell is like a tiny little whack-a-mole, and the Braille dots jump up and down, and then you can run your fingers over them and then read in advance. And it's pretty magical. So in this video, I'm going to pull apart this Braille Lite. I've already taken out all the screws, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how it works and just describe what it looks like on the inside. But before well, I don't know. I don't know what to say. I'm excited, guys. I found a cool dude. His name is Norm S. But he is the inventor of his name is on the patent for the first Braille display in 1970. All right. So even though this is from, like, let's just call this some millennial note taker. This guy invented it, and he lives in Bedford. So I Facebook friended him, or I requested friendship. So let's start taking this apart, okay? So top portion of this little, gray plastic rectangle is your 6 Braille entry keys and your space bar. And then in the lower portion, you have your 18 cell refreshable Braille display, and then another like space bar thing. And then in the lower right hand corner, cut into the plastic, are some gaps in sort of a circle for the speech output. So I will take off the face of it and reveal the inside. So we still see the black plastic, right? I've just taken away the white plastic, gray plastic covering. And so you still see the black keys, and there's lots of like black rectangles and stuff like that. I described this, I made this in like a pre-Charlie's Desk video. I think it looks like both an ancient city in terms of like, there's these big, monuments and stuff. But then also maybe like a futuristic city in terms of quality and lots of like little fine metal components and, modern looking things. But that's the chips, right? So the base of the chips is this thin green silicon wafer, and then connected to it by lots of little tiny wires. I actually don't know what they are. They're small black rectangles. So this is the first chip. It has the 6 keys. I think it's very fun. It's extremely satisfying to press these keys. And this was a note taker, so you could just like enter text and make files and connect it to a computer. There's an old peripheral on the side, very before the days of USB. I don't even know what it's called. I want to say coaxial, but I think you could hook this up to a printer. I think you could hook this up to a computer. I sort of think this was very early or pre-internet. All right, so that's this, like the keyboard is connected to a big rectangular chip that's about as wide as the whole device. And then then there's the Braille display itself. And it's the heaviest and biggest component of it. I'm gonna go into more detail about it. It's the size of 2 decks of cards stacked next to each other. I'm gonna shake it a little bit next to my ear just so you can hear the pins going in and out. So I'm hanging it upside down by my ear, so you hear the little dots come out. That's some shaking in there. So this thing is like 2 decks of cards next to each other. And this is the primary cost of the device. I'm gonna put this to a side. And then there's these other little chips. And what's fun is the wires are all different colors. So they look like rainbows. So you have the chip and there's stuff on it, and then they have rainbow wires extending out, and they kind of clip into each other. Like I'm gonna connect these 2 chips. I already separated this out before, but they click together. Sort of a satisfying way. Yeah, this is, I had no qualms taking this apart because it was broken. So yeah, they clip together. So this, this chip connects to this chip. I don't really know what it does. But Get that out of the way. Here's another chip. Oh, they all say stuff on them. Lazy Engineering, Braille Lite, HVPCB, in parentheses, Rev 2. I don't know. I don't know. Here's another little one that has button inputs. The long key that I can't identify, the long rectangular key that's not the space key, that would go into this, and then there's a little thin rectangular chip that has button inputs. Also very satisfying to push. They just take this pushing of the button, they turn it into an electrical signal. And then there's a little classic round speaker thing. There's cloth on the front of it if you've never taken one of these apart. And then there's a magnet on the back, and a little 2 wires that connect the same little thing that's in your headphone. And every speaker just is a speaker. We'll talk about that later. Yeah, I don't know what this is. And then the bottom plastic case, get that out of the way. And then in the center of the desk, we come to the Braille display, which is really, that's what this video is about. So I'm gonna zoom in because now we're focused. I'm doing the best I can to be focused. Okay. It's centered. I'm gonna take a drink of water. Actually, I'm gonna show it, like, there we go. So in this one, off to the upper left-hand corner of the Brailler, beautiful rainbow wire connection. And that's so you could, tell the wires apart, right? That's gorgeous. And then your deck of cards situation in your refreshable Braille display, 18 cells. So I was trying to do a little bit of research and prep for this video. And there's not, there's a ton of stuff on the internet, but there isn't a really solid Wikipedia page. This required some digging. So the thing that I did find in the Wikipedia page is how the mechanism by which this works. What makes the little dots go up and down? How does this game of whack-a-mole work? This tiny game of whack-a-mole. And it relies on the piezo effect. Have we ever heard of that? And so it's these crystals. And the piezo effect is when some crystals, when a little voltage is applied to them, they expand. So each dot has a crystal, which is connected to a lever, which is connected to the dot. And when a voltage is applied to the crystal, it expands, pushes the lever, and raises the dot. And that's called the piezo effect. Or no, the fact that a crystal will expand with electricity in it, that's the piezo effect. And that's how it's used to create the refreshable Braille display. And I just think that's so cool that every dot has a crystal, has a little tiny crystal. So that's why these things get so wicked expensive. And that's why it's the biggest and heaviest component of the device. And there's different patents for it, but the dude Norman, I don't know what he likes to be called, but who lives in Bedford, he filed a patent for this in 1970 in Bedford, the MITRE Corporation, which turns out to be, a defense corporation, which just expands this whole tradition of technology and stuff for people who are blind coming from the defense world. The thing that inspired Louis Braille was night writing, which was a thing invented for Napoleon's army so they could secretly communicate at night. And Louis Braille heard a presentation about this and digested it and spat it back out as Braille. Anyways, I digress. But this guy, Norman B. Sutherland, he files a patent for this from the MITRE Corporation in 1970. And then previously in 1960, a guy named Robert Mann, sort of the papa of digital Braille, because he writes DOTSIS, which is the first Braille translator file in 1960. So with DOTSIS in 1960, and with the Refreshable Braille display invention in 1970, you know, it's a brand new world. And then it takes, you know, a while for it to become a commercial product. So yeah, the Refreshable Braille display. So, you know, this has 18 cells, and I'll make the math easy on myself. And normally there's 6 dots in a cell, but these ones have 8. So that means 8 crystals per cell, and per 10 cells, that's 80 crystals. And that's only 10 characters. So if you want like 40 cells, 40 characters, or 80 cells, how many 80 would be, right? 800 crystals. And when you're talking crystals, you get why there's some money involved, all right? So that is the Refreshable Braille display. I'll zoom